Everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemens, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is a Life with Jason Clemens, DC, coming to you right here from the live from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios in Lubbock, Texas. We're on the radio with you at 98.7 Walk by Faith, 1420 AM. We're on 987radio.com. We are streaming on social media all over the world. Just about to be on the Walk by Faith Facebook page. We're on the Rock Health and Wellness Center's page, YouTube at Jason, at Health from the Rock. And we're on X at Jason Clemens DC. Hope everybody had a great day. Hope you did healthy things today. Hope you made healthy choices today. Hope you got your workout in. Hope you're eating good tonight, or on your way to eating good tonight. Hope you enjoyed last night's show. Hope you got something out of that. And I've got to call to see who that is. Might be a message. But about the show. Hey, tonight we're going to talk about leg length discrepancies in kids. We started that last night, kind of introduced it to you just for a second. And I wanted to get into it, and I think it's going to be really good because it's not something that we think about when we break down all of the things that go along with it. You know, there's a lot that goes along with it. And there's a bunch of articles that support it. There's a bunch of articles that support it. So I really do think it will be a cool show. So we'll get into it. And, I'm gonna kind of preface it just a little bit before we get into the show, because I had a great conversation today with one of my patients and we were talking about what happens when you don't function properly? And you think of it in one area, and it kind of goes both ways. So you think of it in one area, like let's say your hip hurts, and you could have your hip could hurt, your knee could hurt, your ankle could hurt, something like that, right? You could be having some sort of pain in your hip, your knee, or your ankle from malfunction in your low back. Let's take an extreme case, and let's say you had surgery on your low back, and your low back is now not moving the way that it's supposed to move. Or you could say that you had surgery on your hip, or you had surgery on your knee. Now, any of those things could be caused by abnormal function from something else. I mean, we know that's true. Let's say you didn't have an injury to your knee, but you ended up with having surgery on your knee, or you tore a meniscus, but you weren't really doing anything. It just kind of eventually tore, or there was some sort of problem in over a long period of time, but there wasn't an injury. Like you didn't go water skiing or snow skiing or something like that, or get injured in some sort of athletic event. You didn't have a car wreck or anything like that. You just had this problem with your knee. And so what we know is that knee is secondary to something else that was going on, right? But it wasn't a knee problem by itself. It was maybe a brain problem. That's where we would start, right? Maybe an alignment issue, maybe a functional issue of your pelvis. Maybe your pelvis wasn't working exactly like it was supposed to. There could be lots of different things that are going on out there that you have to you could break it down and say, okay, I see what's going on. Well, I had this conversation today about a person that had low back surgery, and now we're having hip problems, and we even have some hamstring origin problems. So your hamstring is the muscle on the back of your leg, right? So hamstring is a slang kind of term. That's not what that muscle's called. But you've got this hamstring that's at the back, and where it connects is all the way up underneath on the little bone that you sit on, right underneath your glutes. So if you were to like reach all the way up right underneath your glutes in the place that you're sitting. If you're sitting down on a chair and that's the place that's touching the chair right there. And that's where your hamstring is. And this particular issue was on the opposite side of where the pain was. The pain that's secondary to the low back surgery, right? So we got low back surgery, which leading to a hip pain, which is leading to a hamstring tear on the other side. And it's like, where is the genesis of the problem? What is going on, and what is happening in this particular case to cause this to happen? And you might be having that same thing. I adjusted a guy today that's a bodybuilder, and he's having a right shoulder problem. Well, when we evaluated his brain, he did a step test to the left. He's got a low left shoulder. He's got an anterior rotated right shoulder. I mean, he's got a low right shoulder. He's got an anterior rotated right shoulder, and he's having some difficulty in his shoulder, and he's also having some difficulty in his wrist. He thought he had an event that, like a tree fell on him. He was cutting some limbs and a tree fell on him, and he ended up with some wrist pain, but it won't go away. And it's not broken. He's had it x-rayed, all that sort of thing. But it's kind of like, okay, now we start to see we have this chain of events that is taking place that's breaking down our parts. And it's not because the parts themselves are defective. It's because the stress and strain on those parts is abnormal because of the whole body abnormality. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Like, I hope it makes a little bit of sense to say that it's a whole body issue. It's not just, what's wrong with my hip? People will say that, well, what's wrong with my hip? And it's like, well, maybe nothing's wrong with your hip. Maybe, here's one you got to watch out for. Maybe you'll go to the store. Maybe you go to the doctor with hip pain, and they'll do an x-ray, and they'll find something on the x-ray, like degeneration or something in your hip, and they'll tell you that's the reason that your hip hurts. Well, now you're off on this wild goose chase. Maybe it'll be a little better if I can kind of draw this out and talk it through, because this goes right along with the theme of the show tonight. It's like, what is it that's happening? And let's just draw us a stick figure, and we'll take our little stick figure guy. All right, and let's just say for a second in this stick figure guy that, well, let's say, because what we know is that we've got an issue in the brain. So the brain is not firing properly. And because the brain is not firing properly, the brain has been losing its ability to keep the low back to function properly. So now we've got this low back issue that's going on, and it's not functioning properly either. If you go back to, I think, it's last Friday's show, where we talked about the disc have the receptors in them, and those receptors, the Golgi and the Ruffini receptors that are in the disc, are feeding back to the brain. They also have that reflexive loop around to the muscles that are on each side of the spine. So we've got this whole neurological system that is involved in low back function. That, let's say that the brain's not working right, so now the low back's not working right, and then we end up with some sort of low back surgery or something else, right? And then what we do is, months down the road, all of a sudden our hip starts hurting, and we can't, our hip's not doing right. So we go to the doctor and we tell them about our hip. And then the doctor takes an x-ray, and then the x-ray reveals degeneration, degenerative joint disease, which your doctor is going to call arthritis, right? They're going to call that arthritis. They're not going to call it degenerative joint disease. So now you've got this hip problem, but you've taken an X-ray and you've got degeneration, and your doctor's going to marry those two things together, and he's going to tell you, here's the reason that your hip hurts. And it's like, wait, stop. That may or may not be true. My hip may hurt because of whatever you see on that X-ray, or that could have been on that X-ray for 10 years. I could have X-rayed your hip anytime over the last 10 years. I could have X-rayed your hip anytime over the last 5 years and found that same level of degeneration in your hip. But now all of a sudden your hip is killing you. Down the road from when your back started killing you, down the road from when your brain quit working right. And so you go into the doctor, they take the X-rays, they see the DJD, they marry the DJD back to the pain that's in your hip, and then you're now on a treatment plan. You're on a treatment plan to address your hip pain that has nothing to do with the DJD in your hip. Now you're on this, now we're on this hip pain treatment plan thing. Well, you need to go see your physical therapist, and you need to have probably some sort of injection, and there's some things that we need to do. And it's like none of that had anything to do with that DJD. That the real source of that hip pain was secondary to what was going on in your back, which was secondary to what was going on in your brain. And what really is going to solve the hip problem is to get your brain to function properly. Does that make any sense? Maybe. If it does, you can send me a text. 806-794-0400. You can send me a text if it makes any sense. Because otherwise, I think this happens every day. I think people get off in these wild goose chases about what kind of treatment plan they ought to have that doesn't have anything to do with what they think their problem is. I mean, I think there's evidence that lots of diagnoses are wrong. Like, you get a diagnosis and people want that. They want, doc, tell me what is wrong with me. Tell me what I have. Give me a diagnosis that I can latch on to. Oh, I've got arthritis in my hip. Oh, there you go. I knew it. I knew that's what it was. It was arthritis in my hip the whole time. I was like, that's what it was. Dang it. My daddy had arthritis in his hip, and my granddaddy had arthritis in his hip. I think it runs in my family. It's just like, no. No, none of that. My daddy's arthritis in his hip doesn't have anything to do with my hip. Like, come on, man. It's like, no, why is my hip not functioning properly? And how do you know for sure it's that DJD that's causing the problem? Because what would happen if we got your brain to function properly and then all of a sudden your hip quit hurting? Wouldn't we have to divorce that? We would have to have a divorce down there between degenerative joint disease and your pain? Yep, we'd have to and then it'd be like, man, I thought I had it all figured out, but then I didn't have it all figured out because I didn't even look at my brain, right? So I think that's a pretty awesome explanation. Even if I'm the only one that understands it, I think it's a pretty awesome explanation of what's going on there. So let's get into the article. And if you're just joining us, you can run it back and you can listen to this first part, because what I'm trying to do is we had some really cool conversations today about secondary problems in areas that had nothing to do with the primary cause of the problem. One person has a shoulder problem, another person has a hip problem. Neither one of their problems is a shoulder problem or a hip problem. It's just where the pain is manifesting itself. It's where the breakdown is taking place because of what is going on upstream from it. That's what we were talking about right there. So, and I want to show you now, like, let's check out what goes on with kids. Because we introduced this last night, and so we're going to get back into it tonight and see how far we can get through it. But this is the impact of mild leg length discrepancy on pelvic alignment and gait compensation in children. And compensation is the big word in that sentence. The compensation is what I was talking about on the person with the hip pain and the person with the shoulder pain. It's the compensation to the abnormal, in this particular case, pelvic alignment. And the gait compensation. Gait means how you walk, right? The way that you walk is your gait. So how does your brain compensate for your leg lengths being different? And that's what this article is going to talk about. The study aims to identify gait deviations, changes in the way you walk, in children and adolescents with mild leg length discrepancies, and examine the relationship between the leg length discrepancy severity and the lower limb compensatory strategies. Your knees, your feet, your ankles, your feet are all, they're not compensating. Your brain is having to figure out how it's going to walk when your legs are the different lengths. And depending what the article here is doing is saying, depending on what that leg length discrepancy is, now it's going to really, we might have some differences, and we can get through the article, but we might have some differences in those leg length discrepancies or the compensatory strategies based on how much discrepancy there is in the hips. Your brain, it's so cool because when you look at it neurologically and then you say, okay, what is happening? This is why getting on your feet is such a big deal. I had the same conversation with my daughter. She's like, Dad, my shoulders are rolling forward. And I said, I know, you need to get on your feet and walk. And she's like, Dad, why do you always do that? Like, tell me how to fix my shoulders. I'm like, sometimes it's like, well, your shoulders are coming forward because your frontal lobe is not firing properly and it's not inhibiting your flexors. So how do you drive your frontal lobe? You should get on your feet, right? So here's our brain. Hang on, let me change our color right here. Here's our brain. And just for fun, there's our cerebellum. So what is going on? Like we got this whole firing pathway, right? Up and to the right, over to the left, right? Okay, that's our big picture firing pathway. But man, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on inside the brain underneath all that. I mean, it's like a symphony. It's such amazing, it's just like, wow, all the stuff that's happening inside the brain. But one of the things that's going on is your right brain is going to tell your left brain the big picture. So I sit here and like, I'm looking at the screen right now and I just turn my head and I look towards that door. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is my right hemisphere of my brain is going to look to see if there's anybody in that doorway. Is there any threat in the doorway? In a microsecond, it's going to happen. My brain's going to look over there. It's going to say, oh man, there's no threat. But then what is he doing? Like what? He's looking at that door handle. Like his brain is going to want to tell his right brain is going to want to tell his left brain, hey, he wants to walk to the door handle. So then the left brain is going to have to fire down to the cerebellum and say, make me a plan. Make me a plan on how we're going to walk to the door. That's what the job of the cerebellum is. Balance, coordination, and posture. Coordination is the part of that. The cerebellum has to try to figure out, okay, I need to know which muscles are online, which muscles are offline, what is the status of my leg links, what is going on? Do I have a blister on my toe? Like, is my ankle firing like it's supposed to? Is my calf muscle working? The cerebellum's got a lot of work to do right there. The cerebellum has to try to figure out what motor sequence am I going to use to present back to the left hemisphere a plan to get us to that door. So the cerebellum's going to be like, Okay, you're going to have to do all that stuff, right? And then the cerebellum is going to it's going to send the signal back to the left brain. And then the left brain's going to send the signal back to the right brain and say, is that what you wanted? And the right brain's going to say yes. And then so the right brain is now going to send the signal back to the left, to the cerebellum, and it's going to say, go, bam, we're going to step to the door. There's a lot of stuff going on right there, right? Like it's all going on. It's all really firing. Okay, so now what we've got to do is we've got to figure out how are we going to start this movement? How are we going to maintain balance? How are we going to be able to move ourselves when we have an abnormal leg length now? And that's what this article is talking about when it's talking about the strategies that we have to move. Examine the relationship between study to identify gait deviations in children and adolescents with mild leg length discrepancy. Gait deviations. How does this child change its gait based on the fact that one leg is longer than the other or shorter than the other? And then examine the relationship between this difference, severity, and the lower limb compensatory strategies. Like if it's, and they broke them up into 3 groups. They said the mild group is 0 to 1 centimeters, which it would have to be 0.1 to 1, or because if it was 0, it wouldn't have a leg length discrepancy, right? So that was the mild group. And then the moderate group was 1 to 2 centimeters, and then the severe group was 2 to 3 centimeters. And these are actually measured leg length discrepancies. These are not pelvic rotation problems or lumbar rotation problems, and it's definitely a pelvic discrepancy. And then I showed you last night where he's got the picture, like if you got a hip down on one side, and then what's going to happen with rotation, and how are you going to have what's going to happen with the quadratus lumborum on one side. It's going to get really tight, the muscle that connects from the bottom rib and some of the lumbar vertebrae down to the top of the hip bone, your ilium. And then what's going to go on with the rotation of the vertebra. Because remember, when you bend in your lumbar spine, the lumbar spine rotates the spinuses into the bend. It's called a coupled motion. So you're getting two ranges of motion at the same time. You're getting lateral flexion and rotation of that vertebra at the same time. And that when that leg length discrepancy is there. And then he pointed out right here, John F. Kennedy, and I'll try to read this. It's kind of small, but the 35th president of the United States, John F. Kennedy, experienced chronic back pain beginning in his early 20s. He underwent a total of 4 back operations, including a discectomy, an instrumentation and fusion, and 2 relatively minor surgeries that failed to significantly improve his pain. The authors examined the nature of the etiology of JFK's back pain and performed a detailed investigation into the former president's numerous medical evaluations and treatment modalities. This information may lead to better understanding of the profound effects that his back pain and its treatment had on his life as presidency. And even death. I guess, I don't know, maybe they're saying that if his brain didn't work properly, he might have ticked off the CIA and they shot him. Whatever. I don't know how that fits, but we could map it that way. So whoever did it, whatever, not getting into that tonight. But I didn't know that about him. He had 4 back operations, including the discectomy. And that's part of the conversation that we had today. Part of the conversation we had was when you're doing chiropractic care or chiropractic wellness care versus you're doing surgery, orthopedic care, it's a lot of times people, because of the status of the orthopedic surgeon, because of the commonality that everybody gets their knee replaced, it's like, well, my orthopedic told me this. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe your orthopedic is right, and maybe they're not. And maybe having surgery is a good thing, and maybe it's not. We always assume that if we're trying to work on it from a wellness neurology standpoint, that, well, this could be good and it could be bad. It might go good and it might go bad, but at least like I know I can always go get surgery and fix my problem. But this is a good point. President Kennedy underwent a total of 4 back operations. It didn't fix his problem. He had one, then he had another one, then he had a fusion, right? And then he was in chronic pain after that. So he had these minor surgeries that failed to significantly improve his pain. It doesn't mean that that's the best option because you go have surgery. What it means it's just an option. But it's like there's a lot of people that have one surgery, then have another surgery, then have another surgery. And it's like, and then after that third, fourth surgery, they're still not fabulous. They're not moving them towards health and wellness, right? Okay. So let's get into this. Structural leg length discrepancies is common, affecting 50% of the population with an inequality of 5 millimeters or more. I don't know where that information came from. I don't know how they got that information. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk about it. I'll see where these guys are from. Yeah, doesn't even say, but yeah, we'll take a break first. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Life with Jason Clemens, DC. You guys stick around. We'll be right back. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't necessarily matter what the numbers are. I don't know where they got that number, but it says 50% of the population with the inequality. But and that's kind of funny. You can say, well, half the people have a short leg or whatever. Okay, leg length discrepancy is common in children and often leads to pelvic lateral tilt as a primary gait deviation. Pelvis is low on the side of the short leg, and that makes total sense, right? Because your feet are on the ground. So when your feet are on the ground, if you have one leg that's shorter than the other one, then your pelvis is going to tilt, kind of like this picture up here. Your pelvis is going to tilt towards the side of the low leg. I mean, and that's right, which is now going to set L5 off at an angle. So your sacrum, this triangular bone in your spine right here, your sacrum is going to be setting at an angle. And if your sacrum is setting at an angle, then L5, if it's setting straight on your sacrum, it's going to be tilted. And then what we're going to start to have is this compensation that's going back as it moves up. So now we'll get the bend, but L4 will try to start to bend back, in this particular case to the right, if we're looking at this person from the back. So L4 will start to bend back, L3 will start to bend back, L2 will start to bend back, and then we'll have, now what do we have? Exactly what I was talking about a while ago. We have the cause down here, but we have the effect up here that's putting pressure on the disc, it's putting pressure on the muscles, it's putting pressure on the supporting muscles like the quadratus lumborum or the QL. It's putting pressure on the nervous system, no question about it. The brain is like trying to tilt us back because otherwise we'd be walking around leaning way over to the side. Depending on how much it bent, you might get a compensation back in the thoracic spine, which then would be diagnosed as a scoliosis. Some people would do that, right? Hang on one second. Let me get us back on the radio. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemens, DC, and we're breaking down leg length discrepancies in adolescents and children. So it's very common, it says, up to 50% of the people. While children rarely report low back pain, prolonged leg length discrepancy can induce lasting changes in lumbar spine biomechanics, potentially resulting in future back issues. No question about that. Especially in kids whose bones are still pliable. So you can just imagine if you have a square and you put pressure on that square, and that bone is still developing. It's not 100% solid hard anymore. And then all of a sudden you've got this L5 that's it's not tilted that far. You got this L5 that's this sacrum. Let's draw this sacrum relatively straight. L5 would be straight, L4 would be straight, and so on. Now, let's put a little tilt in this sacrum and put L5 straight with the sacrum. But now L4 has got to start to make some compensation back. So now L4 opens the window a little bit. And then L3 even has to do that even more to try to get us back over. So we've got this curve that's going on because we've got this leg length inequality that's going on. Okay, you probably won't get a whole lot of changes between L5 and the sacrum, so that the disc that's down here may not be that disrupted, but you're going to get changes in that L3, L4 disc, because now we've got a closed down section and an opened up section. We've got abnormal pressure on that disc. And the same thing's going to happen. It's not drawn very good, but the same thing's going to happen in that. That's the L4, L5 disc, and this is the L3, L4 disc. And simultaneously, you're also going to have some issues along that vertebral body on that side, because it may be smashed and it may have too much pressure on it on that side. And if it has too much pressure on it, and this looks like an X-ray from the side, but that's not. That would be a picture from looking at it from the back. So you guys on the radio, what it is we got this curve coming out of the sacrum where the sacrum's tilted to the left, and then L5 is facing left, L4 starts to straighten up, L3 starts to straighten up. If this is happening in kids, you can actually get a vertebra that looks, if you were to really measure it and straighten it on a straight line, it would look something like that. Like it would be compressed. I don't even know what that is. That's trapezoid or something, right? I don't know. It would not be a square. It would be shorter on one side of the square and it'd be bigger on another side of the square. And now we're talking about lifetime changes. This can take place, and you could be stuck in that formation for the rest of your life, because now the bone actually grew that way. It's kind of like the way the tree grows, the branch. The tree branch starts to grow crooked in one direction, then that's the way that tree branch is going to be. Everything's going that way afterwards. So that's what the article is saying, is like it can move into the future. And we've talked about it here in the last couple of nights about the chain breaking at its weakest link. Well, these kids get set up, and they're young and fit and moving, and they're still pliable and all that sort of thing. They go through their teenage years and they go through their 20s, but they don't manifest this low back problem until they get a job. They go to college or whatever, and then they graduate, and then they're like, okay, I got a job working at the bank, or I got a job working at the school, or I got a job doing the whatever. And now they're sitting at a desk, and now they sit at a desk for 5 years till they're 30, and then all of a sudden they start having these back problems when they're 30. And it's like, well, I think we should go see a chiropractor. And it's like, dude, it would have been awesome if we could have got that baby at birth and made sure that stuff didn't happen all through those years. But instead, we can't do that because we've defined chiropractic as being some sort of back pain modality, and the child doesn't have any back pain. And it's like, if we had any sense about what we were talking about, then we would be like, dude, pain is such a the pain is such a late thing that's going on. Like it's a bad way. It's a bad way to evaluate things. It's like wait until you're blown up in a fight with your wife to evaluate whether or not your marriage is good. It's like, dude, you should pay attention as you're going along, right? Okay, let's get back to the article. We got a text. I do what you say and have cleaned the alley. I'm trying to hold steady. That's awesome. So, and I know that person that just text in, and they're saying that they can compensate. They can really work on focusing and holding their body together, and then they can still function even though they have some of these degenerative areas right there. In the kids, we're not talking about the degenerative areas yet. So let's keep going. And and I'll say this part of this sentence again. While children rarely report low back pain, prolonged leg length discrepancy can induce lasting changes in lumbar spine biomechanics, movement, potentially resulting in future back issues, of course. To mitigate the effects of leg length discrepancy, children often employ various compensatory mechanisms. Of course they do. They have to, because they can't walk normally and they don't even know that they're not normal. So they just go on with it. They play with all the rest of the kids. They run just like all the rest of the kids run. They do all the stuff that all the rest of the kids do, except they have to do it differently because one of their legs is shorter than the other. For runners, a leg length discrepancy greater than 3 millimeters can lead to excessive joint loading, potentially causing muscle and joint overuse. Exactly. That's the pre-conversation to the article, right? And why is it runners? Well, I just think it's runners because they're increasing their step count. It's like, I mean, and they're doing it fast. But what will it do? It adds excessive joint loading, causing muscle and joint overuse. And what will happen to a muscle and a joint that gets overused improperly is they'll end up tearing. You'll tear the hamstring origin tendon. You'll get tendonitis in the glute insertion. You'll have some sort of meniscus tear that's going on in your knee. You'll have a Baker's cyst on the back of your knee swell up because your knee is not functioning properly. You'll get all these down the way. You'll have a foot problem. You'll have an internal rotation, pronation of your foot. You'll have plantar fasciitis. You'll have, whatever, heel spurs or some sort of Achilles tendon type of issue that's going on because of the compensatory changes that you have to deal with right there. In adults, leg length discrepancy as little as 9 millimeters has been linked to low back pain, of course. In children, surgical interventions are commonly recommended when there exceeds 2 centimeters, when the discrepancy exceeds 2 centimeters, while smaller discrepancies are generally managed with conservative measures. In our office, if we know that you have a leg length discrepancy, we use a heel lift in the shoe. I had a girl that worked for me here recently. We had to actually go get her shoe. I made the recommendation to her that she needed to go have her shoe built up. She'd been having hip problems her whole life due to a congenital issue in her hip joint. And so she went and got her shoe. She probably had 2 to 3 inches put on the bottom of her tennis shoe to try to bring that up a little bit. Because if it's a leg length discrepancy, if it's a true short leg that's been measured on x-ray, then in order to balance the pelvis, you're going to have to raise the foot. I don't know any other way you could do it. And so, you got to, in some form or fashion, a lot of times they say take one shoe off, take your long leg shoe off, and just wear your short shoe like you're walking around the house or something. Put a flip flop on one side, and then so that you can bring that foot up a little bit. That's just straight up biomechanics, right? Like if you have a true leg length deficiency, then you're just going to have to do something mechanical to help bring that up. It's not level. The platform is not level. And so if you're having issues with it, if you're having low back problems or joint issues or any of that sort of thing, then the solution is going to be in the balancing of it right there. Pelvic lateral tilt is the most frequently seen gait deviation during walking due to this discrepancy and is common cause for functional scoliosis with concavity to the side of the longer limb. Yeah, that's the picture up here. That's the bend. We got the low hip on the left. Now we got the scoliosis type of thing because we're bending back to the right. And then once we get bent, now we have to compensate through the thoracic spine, and now we have to straighten it back up at the top. And then here we go. Now, let's be clear. You can have a scoliosis that is, and not have a leg length discrepancy. That's just as common or more common. So you may have a neurological issue that's going on that's causing the scoliosis thing. You may have subluxation issues that you definitely have subluxation issues, but it may be the actual cause of it. But it doesn't mean you have scoliosis. That it doesn't mean that every person that has scoliosis has a leg length discrepancy. Doesn't mean that. But it very well could mean, if you do, that you might have some of that winding of your spine up through there, right? Increased stress on the long limb side increases the stress on the cartilage and underlying bone, contributing to hip osteoarthritis. Now we're talking about degeneration in the hip because of abnormal stress on the cartilage and the underlying bone. And while we're going through this, we can all understand that we may or may not have a leg length discrepancy, but we may be dealing with some I really don't like the word alignment or misalignment, but just for conversation, we can say that word. Like, maybe my pelvis is not aligned properly, just for conversation. But if we had rotation in the pelvis and then we had a leg length discrepancy because of the rotation in the pelvis, then we could end up with degeneration in a hip because of that problem. It's like that, but it's a down the road problem, right? And notice how they say it. They say contributing to hip osteoarthritis instead of saying degeneration in the hip. To protect the lumbar spine, many patients with this discrepancy adopt compensatory strategies to functionally shorten the longer limb and lengthen the shorter limb. Increase the dorsiflexion the ankle dorsiflexion. So now you're going to bring your ankle backwards. Use the insole's reduced ankle dorsiflexion on the longer limb suggests that this is a key compensatory mechanism for patients with a mild leg length discrepancy. You might get knee flexion on the long leg side. You might get hip flexion on the long leg side. So you might bend your knee a little bit to make your long leg shorter so that you can balance yourself up. And then over time, what's that going to do? That's going to make your hamstrings shorter. Just like anybody who's worked, like you work at a desk and you sit there for a long period of time and you sit there with your knees bent, now your hamstring's getting shorter because of the lack of elasticity that's going on because that joint is short right there. So a child that has a leg length discrepancy, a true leg length discrepancy, might walk around with a bent knee. They might walk around with a bent hip, trying to compensate and trying to balance it up. Compensations for the shorter limb, now you're going to push off your toe more. You're going to plantar flex of the foot. You're going to walk on your toe. And you're going to increase your knee extension. So now you're going to really try to make your leg as long as possible. And so you can try to be up on that toe a lot, trying to make it the same length, right? While these long-standing compensatory mechanisms may help protect the lumbar spine, they can lead to other orthopedic issues, including fixed flexion contractures or early onset arthritis. Of course, they can. You just go through all of the things that happen in the lower limbs, and you can say, yep, that could be a reason right there. You could say degeneration. I'm not going to say arthritis. You could say degeneration in the hip, the knee, the foot. You could say Achilles tendon problems. You could say plantar fasciitis problems. You could say hamstring problems. That's what we're talking about. Contractures, like shortening of the actual. Now the hamstring shortens, and now it's going to pull on the pelvis because where does the hamstring insert? On that bone you're sitting on. So now if that muscle is short and you stand up and you straighten your leg out, it's going to pull that hip and you're going to get rotation of the hip again. Mild leg length discrepancies have significant effects. So here was the findings that this study had. The study says this: children and adolescents demonstrated a significant correlation between pelvic lateral tilt with severity of leg length discrepancy. Ankle dorsiflexion of the long leg caused dorsiflexion, you're picking the toe up, of the long leg caused joint adaptations on the longer limb side that functionally shortened the limb. Does that make sense? It functionally shortened the limb because structurally it was longer. So because it was longer structurally, we had to do something to adapt to try to make it shorter. Increased knee flexion was found during stance of the longer limb. The pelvic rotates anteriorly on the short leg side and posteriorly on the long leg side. Now that's a big deal. That's a big deal right there. The pelvis rotates anteriorly, meaning on the short leg side. If it's the left side, that means the pelvis is going to rotate forward that way. And now, and posteriorly on the long leg side. This transverse plane rotation may influence the height of the hip joint. It'll also influence the SI joint. It'll influence the lumbar spine. It'll influence the way that your brain compensates too, because think about it. And I do this a lot. When we check posture in the office, because I check posture on 99.9% of the people that get adjusted before they get adjusted. They stand right in front of me and I look at them. And you'd be really interested to know that sometimes when I'm standing right in front of them, their feet are facing me and their torso above their waist is rotated. Or vice versa. They might be facing me and I say, okay, just close your eyes. And they're looking right at me, and their face and chest is facing right at me. And I look down, and their hips are rotated, and their feet are pointing off over here. Like, they don't have any idea. I did it the other day. I had a kid do that. It was completely torqued. And so I said, hey, walk over there, touch the wall, and then come back. And he didn't understand why I was asking him to do that, but exactly what I was asking him to do that for was that right there. Because when he stood in front of me and I looked at him, his face and his chest was facing right at me, but his hips were rotated in one direction or the other. I can't remember, but they weren't right. And so I said, well, maybe he just didn't get. Sometimes you walk over there and I say, okay, I want you to just stand there and I'll check your posture. And so you walk over in front of me and you just don't get your feet right. So I just had him redo it. And when he came back, he was standing the same way. Yeah. So you got a problem. You don't want your pelvis rotating anteriorly on one side and posteriorly on the other side. There's so much. Another thing that's involved in this would be a hernia. You could get yourself a hernia really easy, or you could get multiple hernias really easy. Not just because of the gait problem that you have, because when you're walking, if you're not hitting that outside of your foot, rolling across the ball of your foot and toeing off, pushing with your toe, if you're not moving yourself forward in your steps by pushing off your foot, you will move yourself forward by pulling with your hip flexor on the front. And when you pull with the hip flexor on the front, then you increase the chances of getting a hernia, because that muscle now is compromised, and now you can injure that as well. So there's another one we can add to the list: getting a hernia, having SI joint pain, sciatic nerve, right? That's another one that could go along with that. And then, not to mention what could happen in the nervous system that's going along in that area. You could have all kinds of nervous system dysfunction. You could have abnormal, like especially in kids, you could have like bedwetting problems, or some sort of bowel control problems, or things of sexual organ function problems, if you're having nerve supply that's interrupted because of this rotation of the pelvis or the lumbar spine, either one. So the conclusion is this: even mild discrepancies may contribute to overuse injuries affecting the spine and longer limb. Even mild discrepancies may contribute to overuse injuries affecting the spine and longer limb. It makes you wonder, if you were a parent and you listened to this show and you were a parent, wouldn't you want your children to be checked to see if they have this problem? If I could tell you right now, your 12-year-old daughter is going to end up with overuse injuries and in the spine and the longer limb, by the time she's 35, she's going to have issues with her health because of what's going on with her right now when she's 12. Wouldn't you want to know that? And if you did know that, wouldn't you want to help your child now? Wouldn't that be I think every parent, maybe 6 of them out there that wouldn't, but I think every parent would actually say, dadgum, I didn't know that. Jason, I didn't know that could happen. Like, well, how do we check? What do we do with my kids? How do I check that? I had a conversation with one of my ladies this week. She's got 6 or 7 kids. A couple of them she's adopted. They're super great family, salt of the earth people, love them to death. And we've been taking care of them for several years now. And they all came in and got adjusted. And it's one after the other. And so I'm checking them and adjusting them, checking them and adjusting them. And I looked at about 3 of them in a row, and I was like, I didn't say anything at the moment. When she came back in, she brought one of the other ones in, and I said, I think it's about time, because these kids are young. I said, but I think it's about time sometime soon that we make an appointment and we get all these kids x-rayed, because we got some stuff going on that we really need to get addressed right now instead of waiting until they're grown up and in pain. The study highlights the importance of recognizing and addressing mild leg length discrepancies in relation to symptoms associated with pelvic tilt and ankle issues on the long leg. Our results support the notion that interventions utilizing shoe soles can effectively reduce pelvic tilt and improve ankle dorsiflexion, highlighting these strategies as essential for mild leg length discrepancy. Yeah, exactly. You got to use some sort of insole in the shoe, or a heel lift or something right there to get that done. The observed strategies are directly related to the severity of the leg length discrepancy, indicating that even mild leg length discrepancy is not naturally compensated for and may lead to overuse problems in the spine and the lower limb. That's a big deal right there. Compensatory contractures at the ankle, knee, and hip are commonly associated with pathology in these patients, indicated by other studies. This study identifies gait deviations in pelvic motion, which progressively worsen as leg length discrepancy increases, of course, right? So the longer the difference, the bigger the difference between the two legs, the more severity of problems that we have in the pelvis. These pelvic adaptations subject to lumbosacral junction to increase pathological loading and asymmetrical movements, potentially contributing to the development of low back pain depending on daily activity and sports involvement. I took care of a high-powered athlete one time from this area, super high-powered, good kid, good athlete, all that sort of thing. And his leg length discrepancy was probably half an inch. Like it was a lot. And I told his parents, I said, this is a problem we need to address. Well, they didn't believe me, and he's so fit and he's so athletic, and he's doing great. He's in college now, and he's doing really great in college. He's a great kid and all that sort of thing. But down the road, I'll book it that down the road he's going to have some problems. There's going to be some issues whenever he loses that fitness. If he ever loses that stud fitness that he's got, he's going to have some problems with that. When patients report low back pain, leg length discrepancy should be considered as a potential contributing factor. We check it on every patient. We don't do the study. We don't do the x-ray study unless we need to, but we definitely check it. Further studies are needed to explore the contribution of the foot adaptive strategy. So, hey, that's all I got for you tonight. I hope that was informative, and I hope you got something from it. Thanks for the text. Thanks for the messages. Hope you guys have a great evening. We'll be back tomorrow night at 6. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening to Life with Jason Clemens, DC. You guys have a great night.